about to talk about the MeToo movement. Are you guys Kiss fans?
Yeah, well,
You know what made me Kiss fan? That movie, I forgot what it's called. Where Kiss was played throughout the whole movie, and that's when I started liking Kiss music. I wasn't a fan of theirs before.
I am not a Kiss fan. I don't even know if I know Rock and Roll All Night. Is that one of their songs?
Yeah.
I think that's the only
Yeah,
one
yeah.
that I really know.
I think Paul Staley, is that the one with the star? I
Yes.
used to think he was very cute
See?
Yeah.
Well,
back in the day.
now, if you were interviewing Gene Simmons, who is the lead singer of Kiss and very well-known, rock star. He's a rock
Very
star.
well known, yeah.
And he put his hand on your knee. Would you sue him?
I wouldn't wash my knee for a week. No, I would not sue him. If I didn't like it, I would say, playfully, maybe, hey, thanks, Gene, let's carry on with this conversation. So he knew that I didn't like it. And if I didn't mind it, then I didn't mind it.
Right. So apparently there's a woman, and she's going under the name Jane Doe in this lawsuit, but she was, according to all reports, doing an interview with Gene Simmons, and he put his hand on his knee. And I do think she tried to do what Jonna just described,
Right.
Stephanie, and said, keep your hands to yourself, my
Right.
friend. And he did not. He
Right.
continued to touch her. And she tried to sort of, bring the interview back to a professional place. And then he flicked her neck, which, I don't think I would like that. Anyone flicking my
No.
neck. And then apparently tried to grab her buttocks on the way out. And she has now sued him civilly, not criminally.
Right.
What do you think, first of all, just of that suit? And then I want to talk a little bit more about whether it could be a criminal case as well.
Sure. Well, I think that everyone has the right to draft a legal document and to file suit. I think there comes to a certain point where we have to consider whether or not it's in the best interest, or if it's in the party's best interest. I think a lot of the times when we're in this type of situation, whether it's sexual harassment or sexual assault, a lot of times women do want to file suit in order to get the word out, in order to allow the public to know of exactly what's happening. And in this case, it's a civil suit, so there's some kind of monetary damage that's associated with this.
Right.
So we know that she's claiming she wants some money in exchange for what he did, or what he allegedly did, right? But we have to look at it in the fact that, yes, he touched her knee first and she didn't like that. She politely moved it away. He flicked her throat, as you said. I don't understand that. But then it's later alleged that he touched her derriere.
Right.
For lack of a better word.
I like that word.
Thanks. So, that to me is taking it a little bit too far. We're in a professional setting. Now, this is something that you would have done with a man. That's one thing to take into consideration. I'm here as a female. I'm here doing my job as a woman. So please adhere to the same respect that you would have given another male who was performing the same duty.
Well, and I think that that's part of it. Like, if that had happened to me, I would be incensed.
Yes.
And I'm sure she was incensed.
Right.
And, males can take one another outside if it comes to that, if they
Right.
feel like they have been offended. And I think that sometimes women feel like, what else can I do to let this person know that I will not be treated this way, and to feel powerful again? Because that type of behavior, being touched in a way that you don't want to, you say I don't want to, and it happens again, makes anyone of any sex and any religion and any whatever feel powerless. And I think that that's, so I agree with you, Jonna, in the idea that this suit may be a little bit
Frivolous.
just a wee bit frivolous. But what's she supposed to do?
So that's a great question. And I think we have to answer that question by first analyzing, do men flirt? Like, what was Gene Simmons' intent when he touched her wherever he touched her, not including, even on the backside? Does a man think that sort of, let's call it playful for lack of a better word, because we have no proof of anything else. Do they think that qualifies as flirting? And in this new climate, is flirting off limits? Or is there a better definition for flirt? Like, he probably didn't think he was doing anything offensive. And even when somebody says stop, when you're doing something like that, when I was a kid, I would do that till, you had to hold me down, right? You said stop. But I get both sides of it, but I'm almost wondering, is there a place we can meet in the middle on this? Is a lawsuit really necessary, as opposed to having a conversation with him? Or having your lawyer just simply write a letter and say, that was inappropriate. Don't do it again. Not that she's ever going to interview him again.
Well, I think the fact that she was interviewing him is where the problem begins, because this is not flirtation at a bar, which in and of itself is, somebody grabs your butt, you leave the bar. But she's there to do a job.
Right.
And he is getting in the way of her being able to do that job with his flirtation. And I think that is part of the reason it becomes so infuriating, because a woman goes to do a job and isn't able to do it in the same way because now her adrenaline's running and her heart's beating faster and her voice is getting higher, and all of those things. And I'm starting to feel it inside, like how incensed she must be.
Right.
And what's the alternative? Because I agree with you. I mean, truth be told, Stephanie, what are her damages? I mean, she's suing for money.
Right.
Now, maybe she could get some very sympathetic jury that would give her some money for her, because it's really hurt feelings and embarrassment that she's suing for. She has no monetary damages, I don't think. Can you think of any?
No, not really. But I mean, it's the like you said, she's suing for, I believe, mental anguish, correct? Yep. It's more so, it's the embarrassment that comes to play with it as well, right? Because every day I have to think about the fact that, here I am trying to conduct an interview and I have this individual who thinks it's okay to touch my backside, as Jonna so politely or eloquently stated, right? I think another thing that we have to take into consideration as well is the fact that he thought it was okay to do this. And so that's another subject matter that we have to consider, is the fact that why do certain male individuals think that, it's just okay to do that?
Well, and I do think, to Jonna's point, part of that may be generational, because, and I know you have a young son.
I do.
And I think that that's such an important part of this conversation that we're not having. We're teaching our girls, I think we are. I don't have any children, but my nieces were visiting this weekend. And I'm trying to teach them to be strong and confident and competent and all of those things. But I don't know that we focus so much on teaching our boys to be a little softer and a little bit more empathetic and a little bit more compassionate and put themselves in women's position a little bit more easily.
Absolutely.
And I think that's hopefully, President Obama had talked about how in the next generation, race won't be such a big deal because our youngsters don't think of it the same way. And I'm hopeful that with your son and the way that you're raising him, this won't be such an issue. But the response to Matt Damon, I think it stands in the way sometimes of allowing men to speak. So, and I know that we're going to have a little bit more heated discussion about this. So I don't know, there's some of you that are saying, what has Matt Damon done? Matt Damon did an interview, and I urge you to watch the entire interview if you can. It's on ABC. We're going to play just a little clip of it. But he did this interview for a movie that's coming out, and I do feel badly for these movie stars who are sitting down to try to talk about a movie and they get interviewed about politics or social issues and maybe aren't all that prepared for them. And he gave a pretty long interview about what's going on in Hollywood. And this little piece of it the whole thing probably caused some ire, but this little piece of it caused a lot of ire, and we want to talk about that.
This is everywhere. How do you react to that, especially you as the father of 4 girls?
I think we're in this watershed moment, and I think it's great, and I think it's wonderful that women who are feeling empowered to tell their stories, and it's totally necessary. I mean, I think I do believe that there's a spectrum of behavior, right? And we're gonna have to figure out what, there's a difference between, patting someone on the butt and rape or child molestation, right? Both of those behaviors need to be confronted and eradicated without question, but they shouldn't be conflated, right? And so when you see something like Al Franken, right? I personally would have preferred if they had an ethics committee investigation, and you know what I mean? It's like, at what point, we're so energized to kind of get retribution, I think, and we live in this culture of outrage and injury, and that we're going to have to correct enough to kind of go, well, wait a minute, none of us.
So there's Matt Damon talking a little bit about this issue, and as I said, if you read the whole interview, there's quite a few things that he said that are interesting to me. But guys, before we get to some of the response that was out there, what do you think that talk like this does for the overall conversation and for the lawsuits? Because we're in the Law&Crime network, so it always comes back to the legal aspect of this as well. Jonna, why don't we start with you?
To start?
Yeah.
All right, so let's try to interpret what Matt Damon actually meant when he was having this conversation, because I know he took a lot of heat on Twitter. But if I pull out my Matt Damon to English dictionary, here's what I think he was trying to say by comparison. In the criminal world, we have violations, misdemeanors, and felonies. Do we not? We do. And if you cross against the light, you're going to get charged with a violation. The maximum penalty for that is a slap on the wrist. Whereas if you drive drunk, that's typically a misdemeanor your first time. The penalty is here. If you commit a heinous crime, you kill somebody, you rape somebody, that is always a felony, and that punishment is up here. And I think what he was trying to say is, let's apply something similar to the tenor of what's going on in the sexual harassment realm, as you were, because there are offenses that would fall under the violation, and there are offenses that would always and only be felonies. And I think he was trying to get us to wrap our mind around that.
What do you think, Steph?
Well, this is very, very difficult for me to talk about, only because I understand your point. But at the same time, and I do agree that men, as you previously stated, should be a part of this conversation.
Yeah. And in retrospect, I wish we had a man here sitting at the table. Next time we will.
Right, I totally agree with you. But I find it hard to have to agree with him in regards to the spectrum, or to, I guess, just to think about what he's saying in regards to the fact that he's a man. And he has not, or I'm going to say that I don't know of any situation that he's been in. He has not had to experience the things that a lot of us women or the women in the entertainment field have had to deal with. So you cannot sit here and tell me, okay, there's a spectrum. So if somebody pats you on the butt, it's not as bad as if somebody rapes you. I get it. Listen. I get it. It's more horrible than the other.
But would it be better if a woman said it?
I think, I don't want to say it would be better, but at least a woman has a better perspective.
Because I have been the subject of butt patting, right? And I know how that feels, and I know that rage that the woman who was touched by Gene Simmons must feel.
Yes.
But I also do see the continuum that he's talking about, and so I do think, to your point, Stephanie, that there's a lot of people that feel like it would be better if a woman said it. Yeah. And you don't have the right to speak to it because you're a man. And we know there's a lot of people who feel that way because, guys, can we bring up the first tweet from Minnie Driver? So Minnie Driver, who used to date Matt Damon and who, certainly has a voice, she put this up, and then this was her second tweet. She says, men with these opinions about women's differentiation between sexual misconduct, assault, and rape reveal themselves to be utterly tone deaf and as a result systemically part of the problem. Profoundly unsurprising. Now, I don't know, it may be, there might be something personal there.
I think so.
There could be something personal. And I take offense on Matt Damon's behalf when you accuse somebody of being systemically part of the problem when so far, knock on wood, Matt Damon hasn't been accused of anything.
That's right.
Matt Damon might be living his life right.
But I think her point is, simply by opining on it as a man in a dismissive way is part of the problem. Do you think that that's part of the problem,
Stephanie? I think that's part of the problem. And another thing that I want to look at is the fact that he's raising 4 girls who will soon be women. So are his children going to look back and say, well, Daddy, you said this, that, okay, so if a man touches my butt, it's okay, or it's not as bad.
But he actually didn't say it was okay.
No, you're correct. It's not as bad as somebody who may sexually harass me or someone who may sexually assault me.
But I'm okay with my nieces learning that.
You think so?
I'm okay with them learning. I would much rather have them be tapped on the butt and then smack the guy or report him or step away or quit the job or speak to their supervisors than have them be raped. Absolutely.
Absolutely agree.
So I do think that the continuum is probably something that everyone can accept. It's who it's coming from that perhaps might be the problem. But I worry that when we shut down men who are trying to join in the conversation, that then they're not going to join in the conversation, and then there's not going to be a conversation except amongst us women. Now, the next person who spoke out on this was Alyssa Milano, and her tweets, she had a whole tweet storm. Yeah. So again, I urge you to read her whole tweet storm. I don't want to take them out of context. But the last 2 tweets that she sent are these. There are different stages of cancer, some more treatable than others, but it's still cancer. Then the next was, Sexual harassment, misconduct, assault, and violence is a systemic disease. The tumor is being cut out right now with no anesthesia. Please send flowers. #MeToo. I actually, Jonna, it went to your analogy, and I thought it was a good analogy, but one that could be sort of turned back to challenge her. Because there are different stages of cancer, so you don't attack them all with the strongest chemotherapy. You attack each one with the appropriate response. And one of the things, again, I urge you to watch the entire interview with Matt Damon, because one of the things he spoke of is that right now our country is so hell-bent on retribution.
Right.
And a lot of women are hell-bent on retribution because we feel it's our time.
Right.
But what about rehabilitation for those people who haven't learned enough not to smack on the butt? It doesn't mean that they're always going to be butt smackers. And if they're part of the conversation, perhaps they can be stopped so that they turn into people who are actually supportive of women. But do you think that taking them out of the conversation makes that possible?
No, the hope is what you said. Involving them in the conversation will help. I mean, what's the end goal here? Is the end goal that anybody who ever has their butt smacked gets a big fat check and then we just keep doing that over and over again? Or is the goal that we turn this into something that no longer exists, so we don't have to have a conversation about it 10 years from now, 20 years from now?
Right, so that none of our children
have to suffer through it.
To deal with it. And how does this affect, it's sort of like the boy who cries wolf, because if we're filing lawsuits for every time that something like this happens, it does make the real cases where things are actually happening, where there's a tit for tat at work, or that type of thing, it does sort of make them less shocking to the general public. And how does that affect the legal part of this, Stephanie, as we talk about the legal cases that are coming out?
I think it kind of depends on where you are. I'm going to take it back to the venue. I think it depends on where you are, because, and I'll take this as an example, in personal injury cases. A lot of people will file suit in Louisiana for a personal injury case in which they got into a car accident where they have soft tissue damage, and they can get a huge monetary judgment. Whereas here in New York, it's not the same thing, where nobody's really going to file suit or go to trial unless, I believe, the damages
You have to have a threshold of
$50,000. Correct.
Yeah.
So I generally believe that it depends on where you are. But I do think and do believe wholeheartedly that the more cases that where suit is filed in which I guess the allegations are not, quote unquote, as bad as somebody else, it will sort of diminish the whole effect.
Yeah, it's the other interesting part of this is these non-disclosure clauses, and we've talked about them before here in the Law and Crime Network, because
that seem to get violated at every turn. But maybe that's a good thing.
I think they're going to be donezo.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
he said that too, right?
He did say that. If you listen to the whole interview, very good point. He does say that he thinks, and that's both good and bad for women, because there are some women who don't want to be the face of sexual harassment, and yet they will be, because these things will, but it's probably in the long run better for everyone that these things become public and they become something that is easily discussed in society, and everyone knows what's acceptable and what's not. Because one of the other things that he said is he compared Al Franken to Harvey Weinstein, and he said Al Franken did it, that picture that we had of him like roping that lady on a plane, and he said he did that in public. He thought it was being funny, but maybe it wasn't funny, but he was doing something in public. He said Weinstein, everything he did was in private, because he knew he was up to no good. And maybe now men will know that even when you do those things in public that hurt and embarrass and hurt women's confidence, you're also up to no good.
Right.
And it's time to maybe try to find a finer, a better medium. But I know what Jonna's thinking. It's what happens to flirtation.
Well, that's on the one hand. I mean, and Weinstein is almost in a class by himself, right? What does happen to flirtation? Are we allowed to, everybody's going to interpret something through their own filters. What I might find offensive, you might not find offensive, and you might not find offensive. But I also want to add another layer into this, and that is, what role do the lawyers have? Because, and I'll say this at the risk of having rocks thrown at me. If the person who filed the lawsuit against Jean Simmons came to my office and wanted me to represent her, I would probably decline, for the reason that you stated earlier. I would analyze it and say, well, what are your damages? And perhaps this is a frivolous lawsuit and not one that I would want to get behind. But just as lawyers are the brunt of many jokes, people call them ambulance chasers for a reason, you will find a lawyer who, just for the nuisance value, if nothing else, that Gene Simmons' team will write a check for a few grand to make this go away and not be bothered with it. And those attorneys do not help get to the ultimate solution here. And like I said, I don't think the ultimate solution is let's have a payday every time a man misbehaves.
Well, and there's so much there's also the ultimate solution is certainly not to separate men and women and to have them not having these conversations and not being able to work together and having what we're seeing now is, on morning television and in Hollywood is these women-run companies, which I think is great, but probably not so great for your son. It's, the pendulum is swinging and maybe a little bit high, and hopefully it will rest in the middle. But we have to learn to work together. And we have to learn to be able to support and respect one another and have conversations. Because, I go to my hairdresser and they talk to each other in ways that would not be acceptable in other professions. But they're like, this is how we talk to each other. And we know. And I'm not afraid to tell a guy, listen, don't talk to me that way. And it's no big deal. And so, in some places, for some people, it's okay, but you don't know unless you communicate. And when we shut down Matt Damon and we shut men out of the conversation, unless they're saying things that we like to hear, I think that that's a problem.
I think you're absolutely right, Heather. As a matter of fact, my husband and I, we both have had this conversation, this exact conversation as to how important it is to have men involved in the conversation, because he's asked me, he's like, well, Steph, what do you think is appropriate? What if I have, what if I'm at work, I'm a single man and there's a single woman and maybe I want to see, if she's interested, where's the bar?
Yeah.
Because that's a fine line.
Some of our chatters are saying grabbing crotches is probably where...
No, I think
where the bar might
way
be.
Before that,
Right,
I think the bar is way before grabbing a crotch.
Right.
But the bar is probably not that.
Not that. So we do have the conversation. The conversation needs to be had because a man needs to know, okay, what's appropriate? When is it not appropriate? I can give you a prime example. When I was an intern at a particular law firm, the lead attorney would close the door when I would have a meeting with him. I did not feel comfortable with that. That's just me. I would never
verbalize that?
I think, that's difficult to say. I didn't.
No, that's not difficult to say. Of course you didn't. I mean,
didn't.
you're an intern.
Yeah, I mean,
Jonna, I think, I know both of these ladies personally. Jonna, I think you have a ton of confidence, and you probably would say that I'm uncomfortable with that. And I think that that's great. And I wish we all felt that way. Right. But I know for myself, if I were in Stephanie's shoes, I don't know.
Right.
I've never been in that position. I've had similar things and have not always spoken up. A lot of times, and been surprised at myself for not speaking.
Yes,
up.
exactly.
There was a time a guy next to me on the plane started fondling my leg on the plane, and I didn't scream because I was like, I don't want to make a fuss. And you don't really, I consider
myself
myself
think that that's
a very,
problem, though?
Yes. But I totally agree it's a
But
problem.
that's part of the conditioning. If men are conditioned that they can grope and that's okay, we've been conditioned that not saying anything is normal.
That's right. So it's talking to both sides. The thing that I don't want to see, and that's been such an issue, is politically right now, we are so diametrically opposed on so many things, and no one's having the conversation in the middle. And if we start doing that with races, and we start doing that with men and women, and we're just going to have a country that is never meeting in the middle, and that is terrible, I think. And so I do think we have to have the conversations where we say to men, it's okay to speak, and it doesn't mean people are going to boycott your movie or tweet storm you and call you an idiot. And part of the problem, I don't think, I take issue with Minnie Driver saying that he's part of the problem when he's simply trying to, he did say both of these things, both the butt slapping, I almost said a bad word, and the other, the molestation and the rape need to be eradicated. I mean, that was his ultimate
But people
point.
don't hear that. You don't hear what you don't want to hear. So I thought what he said was, pretty solid. I mean, it was empathetic to our plight as women. He's not one of the named offenders so far. And so he was trying to be really even about it. But people don't hear the part where he said that sex harassment is not a good thing. They X that out.
Yeah, I think that women, a lot of women are just so frustrated and feeling so much like they haven't had a voice that now that they have it, they want to scream with it.
But you're right, it's a pendulum. We're over here now. We need to come back to center.
Just like a lot of other things. And listen, this is definitely a legal conversation. We're not too far off topic, because I was looking at the Law&Crime website, and there's a lot of these stories on the Law&Crime website. We've got the Gene Simmons story up there. We've got everything that's been going on with our president and these women who have been making allegations against our president. We covered Roy Moore. Al Franken, and then Russell Simmons, who is, this hasn't happened that much with African American men. We haven't seen tons of allegations against him, but now, and that surprised me. I got to tell you, I love Russell Simmons, and I read his book, and so I think that there's going to be more and more legal stories following these press stories.
Well, I think what'll be interesting is if some of the recent accused, aka Harvey Weinstein, does have a criminal charge or two or more filed against him, which is still in the realm of possibility.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And I think that we will see that. And then also, there have been men who have threatened to file defamation suits or to fight these things.
That could happen.
But that will also be interesting because then we'll be able to see both sides of these conversations.
Well, in bringing up Russell Simmons, I believe that's exactly what he's what he plans to do, because he took a lie detector test. He showed a picture of himself on Instagram in the midst, I guess, of taking the lie detector test to show that he's
fighting it. I mean, he's actually started the hashtag. The hashtag MeToo has been going on for quite some time, and now he started the hashtag Not Me.
Right.
Sort of saying
that's
that
going to be another war.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting, and it has so many people. Like, even I think at the Golden Globes, a lot of women are planning to wear black to sort of protest and speak. And then other women, like Rose McGowan, for example, has criticized people like Meryl Streep who are going to wear black because they're saying that that's not enough. I think that everyone has to remember that each individual has their own personal thermostat for these things.
Oh, yeah.
And you can't say, you need to react this way and you need to react the way that I am, and to sort of respect one another as human beings, man, woman, whatever you are.
Can I add one other legal aspect to this that we really haven't talked about? I don't think anybody's talked about. When you have somebody like Louis C.K., Louis C.K. gets accused, right? And I'm a fan of Louis C.K. And he comes out and he immediately apologizes, this big mea culpa, basically admitting his wrongdoing. That puts him and everybody who does that in a very precarious position if they are to get sued civilly, and certainly if any criminal charges would come up. And as an attorney, while on the one hand, I think it's fantastic that they want to apologize, that it's natural and it's a human thing. When you screw up, first thing you should do is apologize. But from an attorney perspective, probably the worst thing that they could do.
Yeah, it's interesting because my practice is in Pennsylvania, and I, for the most part, defend doctors in medical malpractice cases. And there's in most states there's apology statutes that if a doctor apologizes to a patient, what can the apology contain within it, and is it going to be admissible? Because they want to encourage doctors to have these open conversations, but then it can be used against them. In my experience, John, and I've been working on that legislation a little bit when it came through in Pennsylvania, but in my experience in cases, juries appreciate when people have apologized. So you might tell, and it's the natural lawyer thing to be like, don't apologize, don't speak to it, don't talk to anyone. But actually, I think if someone did sue Louis C.K., the jury may be more amenable to giving him a break because he actually said, I'm sorry, than if he just shut up and denied. And that's another point that Matt Damon makes in that interview, that we have some politicians who have continued to deny, and have not seen the same repercussions as those people who have said, yes, I did it. And so, are we encouraging people to deny things they have done, or to accept you do the time, you do the crime, you do the time? It's we lawyers are so afraid of transparency because it's not, it's
when it can be used against you, and especially in cases like these where we don't have proof positive, where the natural defense for many of these men is going to be, well, wait a minute, it was consensual, wait a minute, that didn't happen. We know that, especially in the male population, they're not wholeheartly buying into the accusations, right? And maybe that's okay. Maybe they're flat out in denial, or maybe they're not 100% remembering the same way. We don't know, and we'll never know. So when you come out and you make an admission that wouldn't otherwise, and again, this is my criminal defense hat on. It's just a hat on.
I think most lawyers would say the exact same thing that you're saying. Like, do not open your mouth. That's why you tell people don't talk until you've spoken to your lawyer, because most of the time the answer is don't talk at all.
Right.
You get that one phone call, which is a myth. You don't actually necessarily get that phone call, but when you do, your lawyer usually says don't say anything to anyone, because all you can do is hurt yourself.
Right.
But and from a legal perspective, absolutely agree. From a societal perspective, I think this conversation is one that has to be had. And when people like Louis C.K. say, yes, I did that, it certainly gives some credence to these women who are suffering, as opposed to like Russell Simmons. You know, it remains to be seen what happens with him, but I'm sure the women who have alleged that he did that are not happy about him and his "not me" hashtag.
Yeah, I mean, well, so he's starting a new movement, right? With the "not me," but I want to say this, and this is not in regards to Russell Simmons, but we do know that there are those few cases, and I'll say few, where there are individuals who are fabricating a story. So it is very important for men or for anyone who's in that particular situation, if you wholeheartedly believe that you did not take a part of this action, that you should stand up for yourself.
Yeah, but how hard? I mean, listen.
Yeah, very difficult.
If Matt Damon, who's just speaking on this, is getting as much blowback, and they're talking about it negatively impacting this movie that he has coming out now. Right. For him just to say that there's a continuum and to get that much pushback, a guy who says, I didn't do that and this woman is lying, I mean, I think that is going to be a very difficult thing, maybe not legally, but as far as your work.
I have to agree with you. And I have a perfect example. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but are you guys familiar with the movie The Birth of a Nation?
Yes, but I haven't seen it yet.
Yes. So it came out about, two years ago? The director and the star of the movie, his name is Nate Parker. Right before the movie was set to premiere, the story came out that he was charged with the rape of a student when he was in college. This student later committed suicide. He was convicted, but later on appeal, I believe he was found not guilty. I may be mixing up the story a little bit. But as a result of that story, The Birth of a Nation did horribly at the box office. So we have someone it was there was a huge conversation both in the media and on Twitter or social media regarding the fact that he vehemently denied that he had anything to do with it, and the fact that he in the court or the legal process he was vindicated. He was found not guilty, but yet he was still hindered by the effects of the storyline coming out. And I think that's what Matt Damon alluded to when he was talking about the non-disclosure clause or the confidentiality clauses. The fact that now it's going to come to a point where a lot of individuals are going to begin fighting every single allegation against them and will take them to court, because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to suffer as a result of the allegations that are coming out.
We speak with our pocketbooks oftentimes.
Well, but the difficult thing is that cases take a long time. You know, the allegations come out and the response is there and it's immediate. And then for me, the discovery in my cases take 2 years. From the day that the case is filed to the day that we go to trial, it's 2 years. Nobody has that kind of patience. And movies come and go, and TV shows come and go, and records come and go, and books come and go. And so there isn't the time for the system to work. And so it's really difficult because we have the court, which I have so much faith in, and you know, you who watch Law and Crime Network, I know you do too. But it's a time-consuming process for a reason. And then we have the court of public opinion, which is very quick, but not always as ultimately correct as our trials are.
Or forgiving.
No, absolutely, absolutely. And everything gets in, and there's no judge deciding whether things are relevant and what's too prejudicial and what has no meaning whatsoever. And it's difficult. It's difficult for everyone, but it's a conversation that we need to continue to have. And cases